for the other panelists and audience, I would like to start by saying, I would like to talk about about the students' activism and what the impact it had, because it was a constructive example. But the rest of the discussion, so I had the honor to be the president of the students' representation that is defined within the framework of policy of in Brussels. So many of them is inaccessible. So these organizations, students, and they represent. It was founded in 1961, when in Europe, in the middle of Eastern Europe, we could not have freedom. So this group of students have the mission to instill incidents in the university that should be the places to debate, to have discrepancies, and to build together. In some countries that are totally repressive, led by the regime of the Soviet Union, many of these students gave their lives away, years of liberty for prisons, and in Eastern Europe, and they mobilized the society and awakened society that for 50 years. So to these organizations, like Margaret Thatcher, Carlo, but one of the organizations that are in Brussels and most representative. Students during the universities, so in the future of our society, and also work to defend a better present, and not forget that so freedom is not just a generational way to disappear, as Ronald Reagan said. So I'm going to give the floor to Carolina to tell about her experience in Bolivia, how freedom has disappeared. So John is a student with the perspective. So thank you. Good afternoon to all of you. I am Carolina Ribera Añez. I am with our former president, Añez. So she was private of in maximum security prison for having worked for in her rights. Democracy are realities that we don't experience in our countries. We have the theory, in practice is something else. We in Bolivia had a continuous process of loss of democratic rights of going towards the 21 socialism routes. Evo Morales had for electoral fraud in 2018, wanted to re-elect himself and going against the constitution in Bolivia. So the referendum that was created in 2016 was not elected. So many of these. And then he was the president of the state under the political constitution of the state. And now she's in prison for having complied with her duties. Her line also, they fled the country and left a government gap, even Bolivia amidst a convulsion, confrontations, death, portals of a civil war. So unfortunately, the socialism government party, they continued with the political persecution. My mother, and when we have presented several resources and recourses, and many evidences, but they have not been. I am a journalist, but I have studied law. And now the realities were difficult when we realized that our human rights are not being respected. We don't have constitutional guarantees as citizens, as Bolivians. Why is it good for common citizens to have see a former president is imprisoned in the worst conditions in a cold cell what justice could have the average citizen if a president of authority of the highest hierarchy has been kept from exercising her rights? We just want to have the right to due diligence, a due process that corresponds by law. Since she, as former mandatory, should have responsibility judgment, she should have had a merit judgment, but she was taken through the ordinary law, criminal law, 9 months. Who was accused and sentenced for an alleged military coup invented by the socialist movement. She's been detained with an anticipated sentence by the vengeance of a military, of a political party that's installing a narrative based on their own need. So we don't have democracy. We don't have the rule of law. What I always say here is without justice, there is no democracy. Without respect to constitutional guarantees and legality, we're not going to live in peace ever. It's very difficult what we are undergoing throughout these months and these judicial hell. Not to know what's going to happen tomorrow. My mother has already 5 processes, one through ordinary means, and they eliminated the responsibility. Judgment because they don't want to recognize her as president, to only to watch the name of a monster who wants to perpetrate himself in power. This is madness. But bad, she's been prosecuted for conspiration, terrorism. Never something that never happened. Yeah, there was never a military coup. Nevertheless, today, the fight from my family, for my person as daughter, crying for justice, beseeching for justice for my mother, the former president. So this is the right, because he has a very deeper background. So today is my mother's and more than 50 political prisoners among police officers, militaries, the youth who are imprisoned by the socialist movement and officials from the administration. So tomorrow is going to be for justice and freedom for Bolivians. I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to continue asking for freedom and justice for my mother. So she needs to have the right to live, to health, to integrity, to be respected in her human rights. And this time, we have so much injustice because it hurts. It breaks heartbreaking. The abuse of power breaks my heart to see my mother suffering, because the only thing she did was the right thing. The only thing she did was to comply with her duty to push forward Bolivia, and then we will have some days of peace and tranquility. But we will never stop to rest, because I'm always threatened by this system that is totally politicized to hostigate me, to quiet me, to silence me. My mother tried to commit suicide because she thought that was the only solution to leave her children in peace. It's very strong. But how are we going to talk democracy and justice when we have countries that are still suffering because of this? Countries that only have one discourse, because politicians say that we have to respect human rights, the right of women, that women have to participate in politics. Nevertheless, there's a former president, a woman who was called to assume a duty, who was called because her country needed her, and now she is totally tortured. She was sentenced by something that she did not commit. I just wanted to tell you, to unite to my voice, to the voice of Bolivians who have their families as political prisoners because of this injustice. We'll continue this fight till they have a fair case in trial with an independent investigation. Thank you for listening, and thank you for giving me the opportunity of this scenario, this space, to explain and show you the situation my mother is undergoing as former president and the situation we have in Bolivia. Thank you. Thank you very much, Carolina, for this witnessing. I think that many of those who don't live this reality day to day, they need to listen to that directly from the daughter of the president. So So, okay. So then with respect to the rights, and then I given judicial guarantees. So we're all with you, and we hope that this forum is going to be good and to be free towards the future. She may be released from prison. Now we're going to give the floor to Toni, who comes from another legal reality. Tony's going to talk to us in almost a perfect Spanish. Tony, although you are from a different country, from Germany. Hello? Yes? Once more. Okay, here we are ready. Thank you. The rule of law is the base of society in many parts of the world as a universal concept. So essentially, it means the linking of power to law and the Constitution. So the objective is protection of the human processes. It's the center is the human being, the acknowledging of dignity, freedom, and equality of each person as supreme values is a consequence, is a must. These values are passed on to the state institutions through the commitment with the law. So the state has an important character to, because we are focusing on the human being, since the individual position as a final point for the political institutions, human dignity, freedom, equality, and the rule of law are a functional unit. So one principle implies the other. Rule of law acts itself as a bridge between the fundamental values and the institutional interaction. Human freedom is essentially characterized by the principle to which rule of law and democracy are not opposing points. They are codependencies. Rule of law and democracy will be exposed in several dangers in the future as a result of the technological development and the globalization of the current world. This inseparable technological progress in our times uh, that goes under, it should be valued also, is responsible, and in some cases, it causes emergency situations, especially in natural catastrophes due to climate changes, sanitary threats like pandemics, and stabilization of society by populism and terrorism. These consequences are increasing and they're going to be more serious in the future. In concrete, the diseases could extend today throughout the world in a very short time. The increase of CO2 emissions due to more pollution could threaten the natural conditions of man. The terrorist attacks should be produced in a digital manner too, for example. Hacking the power supply system, the will of people could be distorted by the use of fake news and social blogs. Having said this in another way, so social inequality crises have always existed in the past, but today, due to the intercommunication in the world, not only they are considered with more frequency, but they are more intensive level. The continuous development of society, it takes therefore a greater uh, resilience from people and the systems and the institutional level to share these emergencies. They limit regularly freedom from individuals, and they just transferred a great power to the executive and reduced the point. This could be legitimate to answer to urgent threats, but in terms of the rule of law, such interventions and changes could be problematic the time of the facts described here, the democracy and rule of law, as well as their performance within their state institutions, they seem to be in danger towards the future. We also need to bear in mind that a society could have, especially susceptible to find solutions in the country, or even for extremely complex questions. For that reason, towards the future, it's going to be especially important to have the following points. On the one hand, we need to awaken the consciousness of state institutions and society, how the democratic state of law would be threatened in the next years because of the despite emergencies. On the other hand, it's necessary to pass clearly the democratic features that are indispensable in the state of law. This requires a wider education in present and future. The judiciary will continue having a special point, and therefore we should assure the preservation and on the executive. So it would be important to reinforce the function control of the media. Dear colleagues, in summary, due to the growing situations of emergency in the future, it's going to be increasingly more important to promote the importance of the rule of law, democratically speaking, especially around the state's institutions, because these contexts could be more abandoned in favor of so-called higher goals due to emergency situations. This is the only way to assure dignity and liberty. Thank you very much. Does it work? Okay. Thank you very much, Toni, for your contribution to the exceptional states and exceptions that we have today are so important in our legal organization. Undoubtedly, yes. So it's one of the topics in the sessions today. I would like to introduce you to Arancha, so she may share with us her perspective as a young student, and now you're in the United States, so you're seeing different legal frameworks. You could compare them. Well, thank you very much, Carlo, and thank you, Amanda. It's an honor for me to be here. I'm going to be talking about from my perspective and experience. As a student of law, I want to focus in 3 ideas. The first, how a young person gets to study law. Well, when a young person starts studying law, we have a set forth democracy that's unchangeable. But I think that European young, we were born with a base problem, and it's that luckily we were born in countries with some implanted democracy in a democratic system. We could start thinking that democracy is there for granted, and it's intact. Nothing's going to happen to it. But really, democracy could be attacked, as we have seen throughout history in many countries, like in now with regard to Bolivia, and for example, it has happened in Spain with Catalonia, where the rule of law has been at peril. So the youth, more than studying the subject, constitutional law, Roman law, civil law, we need to put in value really the supremacy of the state of law, because through the rule of law, we have democracy. Then, to say that we are studying the basis of human life sharing, those bases should be strong and solid. As a career advances, as the major advances throughout the years, you become more aware on how democratic system works in the state of law. And then we have close countries in other regimes, and which are the systems they have. For example, we could see in Venezuela and Bolivia. So in Venezuela, the use of force is over the use of the law. The rights and laws, the freedoms are not assured. The institutions are made. So I think that the youth should not see democracy as the supreme being, but be constantly fighting for that. And jurists also need to understand that democracy is respecting the rule of law. Without that, we're not going to have democracy. The other point, I think, is the youth. We have a fundamental role in institutions. We need to pay attention to the limits, because we could set past some limits. We cannot leave everything in the whale's hand, because the whale could be corrupt, like Venezuela or Bolivia. And we need to acquire a real call, a real vocation, conviction to fight for the rule of law, to be able to live in democracy. And just to finish, when you finish your major, how would I focus the professional work, the professional call, when we are graduated, when we go to to work? First, I would say that it is extremely important to have a deep respect for institutions, a deep respect for the power separation, to the Constitution as supreme standard. The institutions can be broken, and therefore we need to validate and make worth the state of law. So I'll talk about, I think it's important to talk about the polarization and the current confrontation. So in Spain, I think that and the United States, most of the crisis we have in the United States, the extreme polarization we have there, from society is confronted. So the responsibility, okay, to have a dialogue and tolerance. I think that the extreme polarization is very dangerous for the rule of law, and therefore we are insisting the youth. We have the duty, the obligation to implant dialogue and tolerance, especially with the university students. University is a place where we share diversity of opinions, ideas. And I'm sorry, for example, I live in Madrid, and I have several friends in public universities like and Complutense and Carlo-Sotelo, which are beautiful universities. The things they tell me, say, well, what a pity that we don't have a dialogue, we don't have a consensus. Everything is very polarized. So finally, to say that it is true that the youth, many a times, we lack different politicians or leaders whom to go after. But despite of that, and despite the problems we have, we need to eliminate the negative thinking and recover hope and illusion, the dreams, to fight for what we want. So I think that the youth, we are the future, right? But apart from being the future, we are the present, now. So we have a lot of responsibilities, because to recover the hope, to recover the illusion, and combat injustices. We cannot be there right there indifferent to what Carolina has shared, or the tyranny you have in Venezuela. We cannot leave aside indifferent to create a better world, to combat injustices. And that's from the perspective of a lawyer. I think that changing things and create a better world is not just to take the best case. No. The idea is to serve people around us, our customers, to serve them in a society and create a fairer society is what we should do. And that's it. Thank you very much, Arancha. And it is important to say that in the university campus, we have the convivence back, and discussion centers and the violence centers that we have seen in Spain lately and in other countries. in Europe and other parts of the world, where instead of being these places for debate and plural, so they're just turning, they separated pluralism to have just one single truth. I would like to continue now, giving the floor now to Alessia to talk about your experience in Venezuela. So you have the rule of force and not the rule of law. Hello. Well, good afternoon. Well, I want to start saying that I am the daughter of a human rights lawyer persecuted before by Chavez and now by Maduro. So my start in the crimes against humanity were like 16 years when I met for the first time a victim of torture. This victim of torture was a guy from he was the same age. He was blonde. He had blue eyes, and he was just my age. He was raped several times with a rifle in the anus. That was my first experience with a tortured person. I said, okay, that's going to decide I need to study law too. And well, this note, I want to talk about what I think is the biggest threat for democracy and the rule of law currently. I think that it is the impunity. So not only there individually, for particular, so I'm talking about the from part of the from part of the government who are supposed to take care of us, but they promote impunity. There are countries that they do with the citizens whatever they want, without any consequence. And okay, you say, which are the mechanisms we have currently to claim responsibility from the government? For example, the International Court of Justice, the International Penal Criminal Court. What is the problem with these institutions? That they give the opportunity to the victimizer to decide whether he wants to be judged or not. I think that this is a terrible idea, because otherwise, if a person robs and he wants to be judged or not because of the theft, he doesn't want to be judged. So, what can we do to change that? As young lawyers, it could be a little bit political, but politics and law go hand in hand, something that in Latin America we know that very well. Once politics go bad, well, law is going to go down too. So what do we have to do? We need to activate ourselves in pro of democracy, of the rule of law, and fight against this impunity that is rampant throughout the world. States in Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, North Korea, Turkmenistan, Bolivia, all these states act with impunity every day. While we are here sitting, talking, having this conversation right now, there are thousands, hundreds of people who are being tortured. And it is impossible to think that we cannot do anything to help them. How evolved we are as humanity. The fact is that we need to do something for these people. We cannot just stay there sitting with our arms crossed, seeing how there are people who suffer this way, and to say that no, it is impossible because this is a government. I think that the same excuse every day, not interference. So the dictators always say about not interference. So they say, no, you cannot go into our private or national affairs. So it's always so. So what can we do in these circumstances? I say we need to reinforce international institutions. For example, as the Human Council for Human Rights. But we already have something like the International Criminal Court. So what do we have to do? We need to oblige somehow to make people abide, make all these states to be subject to international justice. That they cannot deny themselves to be subject to this law, because we're going to be with the same problem of impunity and will continue, unfortunately, having victims panels every year. We don't do anything to stop this as humanity. We'll never make it to stop the problem. I wanted to talk a little bit about, for example, some cases. The Belarusian journalist, we all know he was kidnapped in European airspace. What happened to this journalist? Does anyone know what happened to him? No, right? What did the European Union do to defend this journalist? Absolutely nothing. It was just a release that they were extremely concerned by the situation. That doesn't help. That's nothing. What we have to do in reality is to get together, unite ourselves as people, as human beings, because I don't think the nationality of the person would be important, religion or color or race. We are human beings who need to defend among each other. Because could be in those countries, but tomorrow could be here in Colombia or Spain or Germany. And then what? The same excuse, not injuries, not interference? That they're looking what to do with their own lives? No, I think that human dignity and human life is above all everything, including non-interference, national sovereignty. Those are concepts that were invented to not be able to demand responsibility from these people who clearly don't want to be prosecuted. So yes, I know that when we talk about this, the first answer we have is it is impossible. It's a beautiful dream that we all would like to have that, to have an international organization capable of judging this type of people, and that it is impossible because their states and countries, their governments. I think that having that mentality is what makes there not to be. I mean, we consider it's impossible. It's going to be like that. It's going to be difficult. We need to think that we can achieve that, and make those people responsible, those senior officials responsible, because we are kind of with a predisposition to think that it's not possible. So we, as young lawyers, we have a responsibility is to start now in the game, saying, okay, what we can do. Try with small steps together, they make a big difference. But what happens is that we can decide not to do it from the beginning because we say we're not going to make anything, so we're never going to do anything. So what I would ask as a young lawyer is that we try with small actions to have a big difference. Thank you very much, Alessia. So you witnessed, just like Carolina's, so countries that are so close for us, the Spanish, but in the end, whether they are or not, they're countries where they have a lot of people suffering, citizens suffering, due to this lack of rule of law, due to arbitrarity that's imposed there. And I'm very happy to see that there are youth, young Venezuelans who are training yourselves, preparing yourselves, so that at a given moment we could resume the legal framework is structured based on these principles in the rule of law, and that we can make justice in Venezuela. In a good time, and thank you very much. Finally, I'd like to give the floor now to Juan, who's also going to contribute with his vision as a young student, and he could share with us about your experience and from that standpoint, from the future of the rule of law. Hello, good afternoon, Juan Martí. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for being here, listening to us. I'd like to talk about this from a little different point of view. As probably have said, we have to be very thankful because, especially as students, we were born in countries, democratic countries, with the rule of law. But that thank we have to is not should not derive. I mean, we need to continue establishing this democracy, that rule of law. That's why I would like to explain which current topics in Spain generate in me certain concern with regards to democracy and the rule of law. I would like to focus myself on 3 points in which the rule of law, the division of powers, and respect of freedoms and liberties. So the first, the rule of law. We all know that this means the submission of individuals and powers to the law and the rights. What I am scared of, in Spain we have undergone some type of pandemics in which the government should have acted with certain urgency in a way that was not always permitted. You see how the government has taken actions that are not allowed against the rules, the institutions. Tribunals themselves have declared that this was not the appropriate thing to do. But we haven't had any consequences. So, without any consequences, what's the rule of law here? When a public power does not have its limitation, does not have the consequences of the application of law, this lack of consequences because of non-compliance with law should have any type of compliance, any consequence. Otherwise, what's the limit? If whenever there's a problem or a circumstance that causes that fundamental rights of people will be separated due to general cases, as you can see in these circumstances, which is going to be the limit. Whenever there's a problem, so we're going to have general interest to the particular, we're going to have aside the fundamental rights. That cannot be so. That would end up with the rule of law and democracy. It should be evident that we need to have a limit as to where the actions could get, respecting always fundamental rights. Otherwise, there could not be life sharing, coexistence. And we like to refer to the aspect of legality. In Spain, we have seen how we have implanted administration several fines due to circumstances that were not connected at the time to have those fines. We didn't have that type of demeanor, so or a punished type of conduct. How could we allow that with conducts that are punished in practice are being fined? Tribunals have talked about that. They've said that these fines should not be charged. Some of them have already been paid, and they're going to say. At the same time, we like to refer to the division of powers. We all consider that in Spain we have the division of powers, but this is not totally true. So we know, like with the truth. So the European Union have had a little attention to Spain because of the politicization of the judiciary. Political parties elect over the desk their own leaders, so they're going beyond their limits. So this is very serious because the law is there, but the law needs to be applied with an appropriate interpretation. When we don't have that to apply these properly, even more, it is almost more important to have the application of the law rather than its writing. That's why the judiciary is extremely important to be completely objective, and we will have a consequence without any politics or politicians, without any arbitrarity. So we should not allow that the same tribunal will be the same one with a political ideology, because conduct should not be branded with political ideas. In this life, not everything is policy, so we need to know about it, to act objectively and to leave everyone your margin of help. And also, we have seen how in Europe, in Poland, the European Union has to set up for some fines of 1 million euros per day, because in Poland, they don't respect these power balance. They don't respect the power division between the legislative, executive, and judiciary. And when the judiciary is not properly functioning, you apply the law. This is very serious. We need to make sure that standards elaborated are applied in a correct life coexistence. So laws are good to assure coexistence and to assure certain democracy. This is the base of our unit. At the same time, we see how we see a lot of politicization in all the realms. We see how in hospitals, and we have all the while a political party gets the power, he gets all their own political ideology, and this is undermining equality. So it's difficult to have a position, for example, in the hospital. So we have people who are just everything is politically gone. So here we have the overlapping of political thoughts in the day-to-day life. We need to set, but that is not set forth in a small day-to-day basis, and therefore we have certain features there in the democratic state. But as was commented, we have to be aware of these problems. We need to fix them little by little and start going, because each country should be required to work based on its own capacities. We were born, we were lucky enough in democratic countries. We need to assure democracy to the youth, to the, and we always need to have the state of law to be facing in. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you. Muchas gracias a todos. Quería, me gustaría que Carlos también hablara, pero ahora tengo la oportunidad de reaccionar a lo que se acaba de decir. Los comentarios, yo creo que de cada uno de ustedes realmente recalcan la naturaleza de los desafíos que tenemos hoy en día. Luego, por ejemplo, los comentarios de Arancha me hacen pensar en cómo en un país incluso como los Estados Unidos no puedes tomar por sentado que existe un Estado de Derecho. Aprendimos esto en este país el último enero. Aprendimos de la importancia, no solo en mi país, sino también en todos los países. Sí que estamos, hablamos de la independencia de la rama judicial. Los jueces son extremadamente cruciales para que el Estado de Derecho se aplique, y de la independencia es un componente clave también. Sin independencia, realmente, bueno, podemos tener otros, realmente sin hacerlo, sí no podemos avanzar. Como, bueno, tenemos que tener un clamor y hay que hacer las cosas que están bien hechas. Aprendimos también del comentario cómo en muchos aspectos, por ejemplo, las fronteras internacionales necesitan mucho más o menos, tienen mucho menos, ahora tienen mucha acción. Y ellos tienen también que tener con su compromiso y no solo darse cuenta que algo que ya se estaba presentando desde hace tiempo. Luego, como el comentario de Alessia acerca de la importancia de reforzar las instituciones internacionales, realmente esto es fundamental. Necesitamos tomar cuidado de nuestros vecinos y también promover las instituciones internacionales que ayuden a los países a desarrollar las democracias y luchar por el Estado de Derecho y, y promover. Bueno, también se está hablando acerca de la responsabilidad gubernamental. Es muy importante para todos nosotros, pero bien. Nosotros como derechos humanos, como se comentó antes, los derechos humanos realmente sí tienen salvaguardas. El debido proceso, por ejemplo. A veces tomamos esto por sentado, como si estuviese ahí siempre, y que todo el mundo lo haría. Como sabemos de la experiencia, así es que es muy importante que nos demos cuenta que construir las instituciones y trabajar con estos principios, estamos luchando por unos mejores derechos humanos implementados. También es importante que trabajemos hacia un intercambio apropiado de ideas y de prácticas hemos hablado muchas cosas, pero unas cosas que se han mencionado es el problema y el papel de los medios de comunicación. Y esto es tremendamente importante, como lo mencionó Arancha. Necesitamos luchar por esos principios hacia compartir información apropiada, cierta, y no permitir que el control de la diseminación de la información importante, porque con este control tenemos también este lado. Tenemos que trabajar para promover los derechos humanos y la democracia y la responsabilidad de los miembros de los gobiernos. La mayoría de todos, desde los comentarios, lo que más me llamó la atención fue algo que dijo Arancha. Dijo, habló de los estudiantes. No solo somos el futuro, somos el presente. Bueno, mi traducción no puede ser, pero realmente creo que sí, esto es sí. Me encantó ese comentario, porque cuando yo pienso acerca de enseñar a mis estudiantes en la universidad, siempre me sorprendo de cuán activos están y llegan a clase y estudian sus libros y ya están allí en la línea frontal, encontrando diferentes definiciones, trabajando. Están también marchando, también están demandando. Entonces, están como en primera línea, por decirlo así, trabajan también en la defensa de los derechos, van a la universidad, saben qué es lo que hacen, saben qué es lo que creen. Y, y también están buscando una sociedad más justa. Realmente en algunos aspectos, realmente diría que de todos ustedes estoy muy feliz, muy animada sobre el futuro, sabiendo que su futuro también está también en nuestra profesión. Pero no solo quiero enfatizar el futuro. Yo creo que Arancha tiene razón. En el momento en que tú te vuelves activa y empiezas a tomar decisiones, a actuar en esa dirección para hacer sus contribuciones, hacer lo que podamos. Bueno, esto es muy importante en nuestras comunidades, pero como dije anteriormente, no solo en casa, necesitamos también estar en conversaciones y por eso es lo fantástico de esta conversación, porque une a las personas. Pero sí diría entonces que después de escucharlos a todos ustedes, es un placer para mí ver lo que todos ustedes han logrado de manera individual. Y para mí es un honor tener esa conversación con ustedes. Realmente es muy bueno porque vemos que estamos trabajando en casi que los mismos principios. Carlos, yo debido a que no estoy en la sala, ahora voy a darte la palabra y para que tú manejes el tiempo que queda, no sé, algo de discusión, los pocos minutos que quedan, tener algunas reacciones. Bueno, también podríamos hacer algunas preguntas de la audiencia. Muchas gracias por estos últimos comentarios finales antes de abrir para la audiencia. I would like to now have an exercise as students or the ones who just were graduated. And used to having that to me. We made the questions in class, but today is we're going to have the questions for us. That you help us continue advancing, building in this pathway of professional or young professional lawyers who want to contribute to the health of the rule of law or juridical systems. So if there is a question, if anyone would like to start with that question, so I can listen to the question, but I'm going to go with the answer. Well, what I see is that having young people with testimonials or witnesses like Bolivia, Venezuela, if people see that, they're going to start thanking the luck that they have of living in a rule of law state. So we're not aware of how lucky we are. So letting people know that in other countries, there are people like us, normal people suffer the consequences of the absence of the rule of law. People would start becoming more conscious of what they are and giving more importance to other games or organizations, right? The important thing here is to make people see how lucky they are and how those places in which they don't have the rule of law. I think that today, social media, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all those things, they are an important tool to denounce what's going on in each country. As a matter of fact, they are activism tools. Yes, these they were created with the objective of being negative or recreational, but today we use them for having active social activism, and of course they have an important part of the rule of law, because we have a lot of denounces against human rights through these networks. Otherwise, if they're not publicized, no one's going to know about them. They're not going to be relevant. So it's just a new method to raise our voices. Briefly, I would like to say that it is true that the youth who live in Europe and countries where we have democracy, perhaps we are not that hunger for that, let's say, for those who suffer so many injustices like in Venezuela and Bolivia. So I think that the key is education. Through education, we can promote the rule of law and that the youth may become aware of how important it is. And that I think that the desire to have a fairer world, so it has to come from us. We have to create it. I'm going to take the freedom now to contribute my little concept. It is extremely important that the youth be conscious of the fact that we need to participate of public life, especially those of us who have, because of our profession, a better knowledge of the rules that constitute our freedom. Because freedom is to be able to have rules and respect them. And this knowledge we have to make it public and within political organizations or other type of organizations in associations in our World Law Association. I think this forum is a pretty good example of how we could start promoting the rule of law where necessary to defend it, when it's necessary to reinstall it, and when it's necessary to enforce it. Through participation, we could conceive many things, especially young people's participation that would guarantee that this freedom, this democracy that we have today could go beyond a generation. Because in the end, the debate is about that to get that our model will continue in a more additional generation. So we cannot assure that for generations that do not yet exist, but we can make sure that our generations, we could have these generations obligations around. So we cannot forget that rights also have their own duties within them. This is my little contribution to this question. Um, the superficiality of society that's taking care of everything and easy solutions end up destroying and damaging seriously our institutionality. So if there were any more questions, I'm sorry, Pamela, we're not getting any sound here. Well, we couldn't listen to the question, but no. Yeah, because of this subject, once more, I did not listen to the question, but we're going to go with the answer. We'll have a brief answer. It could be like, I think that today, democracy, the rule of law, they are not opposing. A principle implies the other. So I think that, yes, society will characterize uh, the justice, the trust in justice, and we have good judicial system. We're going to have more confidence from people, and you feel more responsible in the society for the democracy. I think that if people feel that you can trust the state institutions, people are also going to recognize that as the way they participate actively with the democratic tools to, yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Well, I don't know if you've heard about the youth. They are being candidates in Chile, but they have managed now. It's a group of the young. They began in 2010, taking the universities and asking for the quitting of the dismissal of the dean because the system is corrupt, and you have to be in certain spaces of power. That you have to be. You want to change the world, you have to be in certain power spaces to start doing something. So those youth are an example that the university got together to make someone redundant, someone, and after almost 10 years now, one of them is a candidate to the presidents of Chile. Hence, from that place of power, you can have changes, judicial reforms, as necessary in several countries like in Bolivia, reform in public spaces in Latin America. So we have go to sometime we have that thing that you go to a public institution to rob, and we want to change that. It's very difficult to do it. We need to change. Yes, you have to be involved and fight to go against that situation, and we can do that only being in certain spaces of power. Only there can we start making the change we want to live in a country that would assure that we respect the law and the human rights. Well, I want to tell you that you're totally right. For example, to comment that institutions, some of them are completely corrupt, and some of them are not corrupt, but for example, they are collapsed. They don't have enough resources to get to all those populations or towns. So we have the small acts, the small steps. What can you do to help people in those small towns to get to know what's going on currently, to be more informed about the law and what's going on? For example, in TikTok, there are some accounts that are legal accounts and Spanish, and they devote themselves to explain to people who do not have knowledge in law, to explain the laws, the decrees, what's going on currently. And I think that as the youth, we have to do more things of ours. So as I say, we have to make more activists, and we need to activate ourselves in social media. I know that Carlo travels throughout Spain to take that message to different people. Or it's not a huge act, but it's a small step that makes a difference. Well, I hope Carlos could share with us a little bit more what he does. Sometimes I admire that it's a person for the age he have. He's only 23 years of age, and really to do he actively makes everything that I'm saying that we have to do. Small acts. So perhaps you would tell us perhaps the type of things we could do, right, Carlos? Thank you, Alexia. Well, precisely, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. A problem that I think that we have, the youth have, not all of us, obviously. I participate in in the partisan life, but this affection that we feel towards the political parties are in part a problem. Sometimes it's justified. Typically, political parties get it wrong, but we cannot forget that without political parties, we will not exist. A democratic vehicle to canalize the people's will. They build and they shape the will of people through the votes. So those are the ones that have a political organization that allows people to participate in public and political life and be elected, because suffrage is active, but it's also passive. I wanted to make this reflection for those of us who have studied law in Spain, and perhaps there's a book there in other universities. So when we have that, the political laws of the state, those political laws are on the ones we have. Make politics is not just to be afraid of being in a political party, to have certain political brand, so call it. You want to change everything right now for tomorrow, and in the end, it's going to end up favoring populists. Political parties represent the stability of countries, of states, that allow debates to be organized, and that allow that in the end, debate will not derive in a great social confrontation. They have the responsibility to debate for us, to represent us, and not to delegate as many dictators do in referendums, the great decisions. So after that, they could say, no, this was the people who made this. Who's going to face the people? So, right. So this is a little bit my message, my final message. The rule of law is a situation, political situation. There is not a law itself that could say, if you have these are the articles that would make a rule of law. Rule of law is a political system more complex than just standard rule. Not to be afraid of political parties is fundamental, so we can continue defending the rule of law. That's why I am committed with a political organization. As Alessia said, my work is focused on these political organization. I have a structure that's big enough so that anyone sharing our ideas may go in and work and have a purpose to continue defending these ideas with a brand or with a kind of umbrella that would help go in contact with other people who think the same. And I am glad when I see that other political organizations, human organizations from other political color, do the same. And they do very well. So I am very glad from heart. So I say, whenever I have the opportunity to talk with other leaders from the political youth, so whatever the case, I would like to finally give the floor to our moderator, Amanda Taylor. So Amanda tiene la palabra para el cierre y la conclusión. Por favor, muchas gracias por estar con nosotros hoy. Muchas gracias, Carlo, y muchas gracias a la mayoría de todos ustedes en general. Bueno, con todos nuestros panelistas y Carlo, por tus contribuciones y reflexiones. En cuanto a esta conversación, yo creo que es muy importante tener esta discusión. Y a todo lo que están haciendo, muchas gracias. Realmente hay que promover la regla de la supremacía del Estado de Derecho para un mejor mañana. Creo que esta conversación es crucial, son importantes y me encanta que los jóvenes de juristas a nivel global han tenido esta conversación para que trasciende las fronteras, pero que resalta cómo nosotros típicamente estamos abiertos, todos tenemos realmente todos estamos enfocados en promover
la prevalencia del Estado de Derecho. Y yo, desde mi perspectiva como profesora universitaria, tengo muchos estudiantes y abogados, realmente es un placer, soy muy feliz de estar aquí y también muy feliz, muy animada por el trabajo que ustedes están desarrollando. Muchísimas gracias a todos y a todas. Gracias a estos panelistas maravillosos, a Carlos por la codirección y espero que el resto de la conferencia siga siendo un gran éxito. Muchísimas gracias por estar con nosotros.